Hello again and welcome to another Warhammer 40k Mordian Glory video. In today's episode, I want to share with you my 2000 point competitive Mechanized Imperial Guard army list. That's right, if you're an Imperial Guard commander who loves his tanks, and many of us do, and you've been thinking of getting them out and driving them over to the competitive scene, then this might just be the video for you. You see, I'm going to take you through this list step by step. I'm going to give you my thoughts and reasoning behind each unit that I have included, as well as explain the overall tactics that I'm planning to employ with this force. And so with all that said, let us not delay any further. Let us lift up the rock and have a look at what's underneath. Let's drive right into today's episode. So the first thing that I want to say is that I consider this to be a mechanized infantry list with armored support. This is not what you would call an armored list. That tends to focus on having a lot more damage dealers and main battle tanks. The important thing about a mechanized infantry list, what I think makes it quite competitive, and it's been so for a few editions now, is the fact that it can still play the objective game. When you end up just spamming loads and loads of Leman Russes, sure, you get lots and lots of damage, but you tend to walk away having decimated the opponent's army and yet having lost most games on points. The great thing about mechanized lists that include lots of chimeras and infantry is that you can still score those ever important primary points, and you've got lots of little units that you can also do for actions and other things that you need to do to score secondary points as well. I would also say that I have built this list with three key principles in mind. I want speed, I want power, but I also want durability. Unlike, let's say, a hybrid guard army, or perhaps almost certainly a pure infantry army, where taking lots of casualties is kind of the name of the game, it's part and parcel of what we expect to do. With a mechanized army, I really want to make sure that I'm husbanding my resources, making sure that I'm doing damage to the enemy whilst not getting absolutely destroyed in the process. This being 40k and this being the guard, casualties are inevitable, but this list is going to have much less of a focus on endless waves of men which I can recycle and reinforce, and it's more going to focus on perhaps a more traditional way of playing 40k. You're going to have to be able to do good maneuvering, you're going to have to be thinking a couple of turns ahead, and most importantly, you're going to have to make sure that you are trading your units effectively when they do end up getting destroyed. And so with those principles in mind, now let's get into the individual units. And we'll start off with the core of the list, the foundation, which is the mechanized infantry, the armored fist squads. Now I have taken 6 chimeras. Each one has got double heavy bolter, a heavy stubber, a lasgun array, and a hunter killer missile. In my opinion, this is the best loadout for your chimeras. It gives them a really solid amount of firepower, and with all those hunter killer missiles, they can actually start to punch up and threaten other vehicles that are much heavier than them, such as enemy main battle tanks. But with all of the sustained hits coming from the heavy bolters, the rapid fire 18 inches on the heavy stubbers, and just the whole pitter-patter shots that you can get from the lasgun arrays, each one of these tanks is putting out a very, very respectable amount of firepower. Inside them, we have gone for what on the surface might seem like a relatively controversial choice, but let me explain the method to my madness. We've not gone for infantry squads with las cannons, we've not gone for Death Corps of Krieg or Catachans of Flamers, we've actually gone for Cadian shock troops. I know, bonkers, right? Crazy, but hear me out. Each one of these Cadian squads comes with a plasma gun and a grenade launcher. Now, both of those special weapons are going to be able to take advantage of the firing deck of the Chimera, providing a little bit of extra punch. That plasma is going to be able to put out a couple of strength 7 or strength 8 shots with some decent AP. Really adding a bit of extra AP to these Chimeras is good, because whilst they've got the volume, they do tend to struggle on the armor penetration front. And the grenade launcher with its crack grenade also can add a nice big strength 9 shot, which can somewhat complement the plasma and the hunter killer missile for helping you threaten some heavier armor, because it can wound even like super heavies on things like 5s. The big reason, though, that we've gone for Cadian shock troopers over the other infantry choices in this particular list is because we want to be able to play the OC game. We want to be able to hold objectives. One of the big problems with mechanized infantry is you really don't have that much of it. 60 infantry is bare bones. And the fact that they're all 10-man squads as well means they're essentially, well, they're just not good targets for things like reinforcements. Even if you do use them, they're probably going to be inside the Chimera anyway, so it just doesn't really work out. You know, you want to be reinforcing a big 20-man blob, not a little 10-man squad. So my thinking here is that what we can do with these Cadians is they can drive up to the objective, jump out, secure it, and make it sticky. And that way, even if the opponent ends up blowing the infantry off and getting rid of them, and getting rid of the Chimera as well, unless he physically marches over there with a unit, he's not going to take that objective off us. So whilst we have a lot less infantry than we would normally need in a guard army to take and hold the objectives, we do have the ability to take objectives and still hold them, even though we're not on them, as long as we can get those Cadians on there initially. I don't know if it'll pan out. I don't know if I would have been better off taking Deathcore Krieg just to have that extra special weapon. But then I'm thinking to myself, well, the extra special weapon doesn't really mean much in this army. I mean, the Chimera's already, they're bringing a lot of firepower there. The Chimera's almost act as the heavier special weapons for the squads. And then I thought, well, what about the cast chance, the double flamer? Yeah, I could have saved 30 points across the list if I'd taken all of these infantry as cast chance. But I just thought, a couple of flamers, that's okay, but I mean, I've got, again, plenty of anti-infantry on these vehicles with the stubbers and the las gunner rays and everything. And then I did think about putting infantry squads in the back. I thought maybe having las cannons in the back or missile launch or something, and those are good. And I would say that that's definitely a valid thing, to turn your Chimeras into pillboxes to get those extra bits of firepower in there. But there were two reasons why I didn't do that. Firstly, the only special weapons heavy weapons I have for my Steel Legion are the missile launchers and the heavy bolters. Missile launchers I don't think are worth it. They're only strength 9. They're not proper anti-tank. They're not giving me that big bit of punch. And heavy bolters, well, I've already got 2 of those in each tank. I would like to have las cannons really to get that sort of extra pillbox Chimera goodness going on. But another reason for that is I'm taking a lot of fire support in this list. I've got 6 units that are dedicated to just doing damage to my opponent. And so I don't feel like I really need the las cannons. And whilst I'm a big fan of the pillbox Chimera, I feel like it's one of those things that it's good if you can sort of stay still and you can get the las cannon hitting on a 4, but running around on a 5, I don't know, just doesn't feel like it's going to be all that impactful having 6 las cannons that would be hitting on maybe 5 to 6s. It just doesn't feel punchy enough. For me, I'd rather trade off a little bit of firepower, because I think I've got enough in this list already as it is, and instead get a bit more of that objective game going on, which is something that I can play as a mech infantry, but I can struggle with it and I have to husband my OC quite a lot. So if I can just hold those objectives even when I'm dead, I think that plays into my hand a bit better, and it covers a little gap in the list. Couple of other quick things I want to mention about the infantry before we move on to the big boom boom tanks. I did briefly flirt with the idea of going down to just 5 squads. That would free up 130 points, which I could use elsewhere. But I had 2 games recently which convinced me not to do that. Firstly, when I was using my Steel Legion and I was going against Eldar, I only had 5 squads and I ran out of infantry before the end of the game, and that put me in a very difficult, very tricky position. I did not like that at all, and having that 1 extra squad, it would have made for a much less stressful game, let's put it that way. And secondly, I also played a game with my Tyranids where I was going against Steel Legion and my opponent had 6 squads. And that 6 squad made all the difference. It was a big deciding factor in both of the games involving Steel Legion, just having that extra little bit of OC, that extra bit of objective game. So those 2 experiences, both being on the receiving end of the extra squad and missing out on having it myself, have convinced me to put the 6 Armor Fist squads into the list. And I would say, we'll see what it's like after the tournament, but I would say that's going to be the staple. That's the bread and butter. That is the go-to. You don't mess with that. That's what you want to have as a baseline in all of your mech armies. But now let's move on to the fire support. And we'll start off with the artillery. And we've taken a brace, a pair of manticores. Now the reason we've gone for manticores over cheaper artillery like mortars or basilisks is we really just want something that's got a good amount of punch. That strength 10, the AP -2, that flat 3 damage, and something that can look after itself. The thing with the basilisks is, whilst they're very good and having that ability to reduce enemy movement is important, the manticores just do a little bit more damage. And really, that's the focus for all of these units. They're less about being great force multipliers or anything like that, and they're more about just smashing the enemy. And I'm not running a Lord Soul in this list, and I will explain why in a moment. Because of that, I don't want to take things like mortars, because they need the Lord Soul really to get the job done. They need that take aim. And so just by having a couple of artillery pieces that can sit at the back and they're powerful enough and they can hit on 4s on their own, they don't need any babysitting, I think they're going to be a really good way of me harassing my opponent's backfield objective. And when I come across a particularly tough opponent that just needs a chunk taken out of him, I think a good manticore barrage will definitely get that done. After the artillery, we have our main battle tanks. And we'll start off with the Leman Russ battle tank. Good old Classico. It's got the bow cannon, it's got the plasma cannons, lance cannon, and a heavy stubber as well. Now, this is very much a generic take-all-comers tank. It is not designed to be super efficient, not designed to be super bad. It's just there to be able to engage a variety of enemies, and it'll always do a bit of damage. However, I would say that the list would probably benefit from having this as an exterminator. It's why I've left that turret behind it there. I've not gone for an exterminator at this point, although I may change that at the end, and that's mostly because of aesthetic reasons. I want the army to all look the same. I know it's a tournament, so you want to take the best units possible, but at the same time, I like looking at a beautiful army. I like looking at something that's all cohesive. And so I would say, for me, I'll probably go with this one. I may swap it out, but I highly recommend that anyone that wants to replicate this list consider swapping that out for Exterminator, because it is hard to leave home without Wither and Hail. But one vehicle that definitely belongs in this list with no alterations is the Rogel Dawn. Probably the best battle tank in the game right now. In most guard armies, you could happily get away with taking double Dawn and that being the majority of your armor. In this case, we've just gone for the one, and that's because we've got a lot of other tanks that can help it out. Now, the Rogel Dawn, it can just destroy anything. It's got the Oppressor Cannon for strength 12. Even the heaviest of armor is going to be not happy about that. We've got the Pulverizer Cannon. We've got the Heavy Bolters. We've got the Heavy Stubbers. It can just deal with a huge, wide range of threats. And whether you're infantry or whether you're a vehicle, this thing is going to give you a hard time. Not only does it have a lot of firepower, it's also incredibly durable. That toughness 12 making it the toughest vehicle in the army, and the ablative plating meaning that it can weather the firestorm, and I can be a little bit more ballsy with it. You know, I can drive it forward, I can put it out there a bit, and it should be able to tank the damage. And if it does so, it will provide quite an effective piece of bait for the rest of my army to then be able to dogpile onto whatever takes it. And at the end of our vehicle fleet, we have the 2 tank commanders. One of them with a battle cannon and plasma cannons and a las cannon, and he is there to support things like our other Rogel Dawns and our Manticores. He does have Grand Strategy, so we can put out 2 orders a turn, and he's just there to act as a bit of a force multiplier to get take aim going and to allow my firepower to really start singing and going down range accurately. We've got another tank commander here. He's got a demolisher cannon and the plasma cannons, and he's really going to be there to help support the Rogel Dawn. I expect the Dawn to be getting a bit more up close and personal, to use its pulverizer cannon to get those stubbers into rapid fire range, so it made sense to have a tank commander that didn't mind getting close either, and by having the demolisher cannon, it provides some more big boom, because now, if we look at all of these weapons here, we've got strength 10, we've got strength 10, we've got strength 10, and then we've got strength 12, and now we've got strength 14, and of course all the las cannons that are scattered around as well, they're strength 12. It's just a lot of anti-tank that we're including in this list, which I think you've got to do. I think you've got to do that in 10th edition. Knights, whether they're Chaos or Imperial, they're a thing. A lot of people are taking big monsters, big vehicles. You go across Chaos, they've got all sorts of demon engines and stuff. So having a lot of anti-tank in this makes sense, and so that's why we went for the Demolisher Cannon. Now, I just want to address the elephant in the room, and I mentioned this earlier, but I don't have the Lord Solar. I know that could be a very controversial choice, and a lot of people might say, how can you even consider this to be a competitive list without him in it? Let me explain why I ended up taking him out. He was in my list, but he was taking away from the motor pool too much. And it sounds crazy because he can do those 3 orders, awesome force multiplier, but the problem I was finding simply was that he's 125 points, and then you take the Kachan squad, and then you take the command squad, and that's another 115 points, and that's like 240 points. Now, yes, he is doing 3 orders, but I was only planning on including 4 main battle tanks in my army anyway. I was only planning on including 1 or 2 artillery pieces anyway. And so it got me thinking, I was like, well, hang on a second here. If I'm taking the tanks anyway, is it actually cheaper for me to take some of the tanks as tank commanders? That'll cost me, this one is a 40-point upgrade. This one is literally a 5-point upgrade over a regular demolisher. That's 45 points to get the same amount of orders on the tanks that I was already planning on taking. And those 3 orders mean that I can still boost up my Rogel, I can still boost up my Lemurus here, and of course I can also supplement and boost one of the Manticores now as well. So I've got the same amount of orders in the list, and yet I've got more tanks. Because honestly, I was really struggling to get everything that I wanted in. I couldn't get the 2 artillery pieces. I was starting to go down to I think what really made me decide to take him out was when I was like, okay, well, I'll swap the artillery out for 3 mortar teams. Okay, that's fine. And then what I'll do is I'll also swap out one of these guys over here, one of these armored fist squads. And I was like, well, hang on a second. I'm looking at my armored list now, and I've got 5 chimeras and 4 tanks. Like, how can this even be a mechanized guard army if I'm only running 9 vehicles? That just doesn't feel right. You should be running double digits of vehicles if you intend to run a mechanized list. And so I just found if I did take the tank commanders and the Rogel and the Lord Sword, I should say, to try and boost up all of my vehicles, well then the tank commanders are just going to order the bloody chimeras, and then the Lord Solar is just going to end up ordering these things anyway. And honestly, chimeras, they're all right, but their DACA is more about volume. You don't need it to be all that accurate. So I made the tough decision. Maybe the logic is flawed. Maybe it doesn't make sense. Maybe I'm going to come back from the event and be like, God, I wish I had a Lord Solar. But I've run a few mechanized armies now, and I've not included him, and I've not missed him. I think the Lord Solar he's perfect for a hybrid army where you need those orders to support those tanks. But I feel in this case, because I'm already taking so many vehicles, it makes sense that I just take a couple of tank commanders, because that feels like a more economical and a more efficient choice. But let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. Would you happily swap out those manticores for mortars? And would you happily drop an armoured fist squad and go down from 12 vehicles and 60 infantry to 9 vehicles and 50 infantry if it meant that you could include the Lord Solar command blob? But last, and certainly not least, we have a little seasoning of scions for the army. Now, we've just got the 1 squad of scions, and their job is to drop down turn 2 or turn 3 when and if I draw a card, a secondary objective card, like behind enemy lines or deploy teleporter home or something like that. Normally, I would go for 2, and I did play around with thinking about how I could get 2 in. I thought maybe I drop all these guys down to Katachans. That'd save me 30 points. I drop this guy from a tank commander to just a regular Leman Russ, maybe with like a battle cannon or executioner. That would save me 25 points. That gets me the 2nd squad of scions. But the reason I didn't do that is that gives me only 1 tank commander. And yes, he does do 2 orders, but that really feels like he's a complete linchpin, and once he goes I'd have no orders in the army, and that doesn't feel right. I'd rather have the redundancy of the 2 tank commanders. And also I plan on using one of my Chimera squads to outflank. I think if I have these guys drop down and then I put a Chimera squad or 2 in strategic reserve, I think that would mean that I'd be able to come in turn 2, turn 3, wherever I needed, and start doing things like deploy teleporter home, because a Chimera is a relatively small thing to bring in from reserve. Same with a little 10-man squad. It's definitely not a massive footprint like a 20-man infantry blob with a command squad or something like that. So I'm thinking that I've got 1 sound squad to deep strike down into the nooks and crannies, and then I've got 1 to 2 of my armoured fist squads that can do outflanking, and they can not drop in anywhere, but they can still come in on a flank and do the same job. But yeah, that is the full 2,000 point mechanized infantry with armoured support list. I plan on taking this to a local RTT. It'll be a similar one to when I took my pure infantry guard army out for a spin. If you've not seen that list or that video, don't worry, I'll make sure to link it at the end of this one. It was the total opposite of this army. It was 251 bodies, I believe, in total. It might have been 257. It was a lot of infantry, and that one really just worked by overwhelming the enemy on primaries and just denying them any points. This one I think is going to be a bit different. I think this one's going to be more focused on me trying to get my own points in there, and the way I deny my enemy stuff is by doing lots of damage to them with my big firepower. But I do hope that it will be a success. Who knows? Maybe we'll come back and it'll be like, oh god, I should have had exterminators here and Katachans there and Lord Solar's here and all that kind of stuff. Or maybe we'll come back and I'll be like, you know what? It was actually pretty successful. But let me know what you think down in the comments section below. Let me know what you think is going to happen at the tournament. If you've got any ideas of what your predictions will be. It's 3 rounds and 2,000 points. Relatively competitive place. Will I go 3-0 like I did with pure infantry? Will I go 2-1? Will I start going 1-2? Will I go 0-3? Let us know what you think the score will be from the event. I will, of course, be doing an after-action report from the whole thing, so it'll be funny to see what the predictions are and if they line up with the actual result. But that's all for now. Hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, don't forget to smash that like button and also subscribe to never miss an episode. Would you like to know more? If so, then please consider becoming a channel member or patron. By supporting the channel, not only will you be doing your part, but you'll also be helping me create more content for your viewing pleasure and unlocking a whole host of perks. You get everything from a badge next to your name, custom emojis, but the big one is access to the Mordian Glory Discord server, an online community with almost 2,500 active members. It's always popping off in the MG Discord. We've got channels for army lists, hobbying, tactics, stories, and even a pretty spicy meme section as well. For all you greenhorns that wanted to see the Mordian glory hole, today is your lucky day. And joking aside, I do want to say a massive thank you to all of the current channel members and patrons. You guys are amazing, truly the lifeblood of the channel. I could not do Mordian Glory full-time without the incredible and generous support of my members, so thank you guys so much. And last but certainly not least, I want to say a personal thank you to all of my top tier Patreons. These are the War Masters, the people who have truly gone above and beyond the Call of Duty. So a massive thank you to Bon Bon Vert, Mad Larkin, Mark Panconi, RJ Scorpion, Swordfish Trombone, John Stubbs, Nick Walsh, Diesel Fox, August Vardy, and the Tommies. Thank you guys, your incredible support makes a huge difference and it is a big part of how I'm able to do Mordian Glory full time. But that's all for now, thank you for watching, and of course, as always, I'll see you guys next time.